All right, so you're back with us. Clearly, you enjoy getting right to the good stuff. And today, we're going deep. We're talking about the later years of some of the biggest names in psychology.
Some real giants in the field.
Exactly. And our main source is this super interesting article called The Old Age of Some Eminent Psychologists. But we're also going to pull in some other things like obituaries, biographies, all that good stuff. So we can really get a good picture of what their lives were like.
Yeah, it's interesting because we often hear so much about, like, the peak of their careers, or, when they were making all these huge discoveries and publishing all their influential work.
Right.
But what about what happened after that? Like, did they just kind of, sit back and relax?
Yeah.
Or did they stay active and engaged in different ways?
Exactly. That's exactly what we're going to find out today. We want to uncover those hidden stories and figure out what we can learn from them, especially how they kept contributing to their field or maybe even found new passions beyond what we traditionally think of as retirement. Okay, so where should we start?
Well, the article jumps right in with a pretty striking statistic. It found that almost 90% of the psychologists they studied kept up a really high level of professional activity and involvement well after they turned 70.
Wow, 90%. That's a lot higher than I would have guessed.
Yeah, it definitely challenges the common idea that people just kind of slow down drastically after a certain age.
For sure. And the article mentions that some of them even started entirely new careers, which is fascinating.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It definitely seems like for many of these folks, work wasn't just a job, it was like a core part of who they were.
Absolutely. You can really see that idea of work as purpose coming through in their stories.
So let's get into some specific examples. Let's start with James Roland Angel. Now, he was a big name in functionalism, which basically looked at the purpose and practical applications of mental processes. He retired from his presidency at Yale when he was 68, but then, get this, he went on to become an educational advisor for NBC Radio.
That's a pretty big change, huh? Especially at that point in his life.
I know, and he apparently really enjoyed it. He commuted into New York City 5 days a week for 12 years.
Wow. Talk about dedication.
Right. And even when his health started to decline later on, he still managed to make it to a reunion and give a speech not long before he died at the age of 80.
It's inspiring, really. It shows his drive never really went away.
It really does. Okay, so next up we have Edwin Garrigues Boring.
Oh, a legend in the field.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, his name is practically synonymous with the history of psychology.
Right. He retired at 71, but basically just kept going strong in different ways. He taught full-time, even started doing psychology classes on television, pretty cutting edge for the time.
Yeah, that's really cool.
He also founded a new journal, Contemporary Psychology, and wrote biographies and gave lectures. The whole 9 yards.
Yeah, it's like he just couldn't stop. And the article says he worked almost up until his death at 82, even though he was apparently dealing with a lot of pain.
It really highlights that for some people, their passion just pushes them to keep going no matter what obstacles they face.
Yeah, it makes you think about what retirement even means.
Right.
Like for these folks, it wasn't necessarily about stopping work altogether.
Yeah.
It was more about finding different but still meaningful ways to contribute.
That's a good point.
Okay, now let's move on to James McKeen Cattell. He was actually the very first professor of psychology in the U.S. And get this, he never officially retired.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was a real go-getter. He stayed super involved in psychological testing and academic publishing, even with journals like Science.
Wow. Science is like, the gold standard for scientific journals.
Exactly. And he did all this while also maintaining a really active social life and staying close to his family.
It kind of breaks that stereotype of, the workaholic who neglects everything else.
Yeah, it shows that you can stay engaged in your work without sacrificing other important parts of your life. All right, next up we have John Dewey.
Oh, the philosopher.
Yeah, but also a big influence in psychology.
Right. He officially retired when he was 80, but stayed incredibly busy. He wrote like crazy, published 4 books in 5 years, plus tons of articles.
Wow. What kept him going like that?
Well, he was also a big advocate for academic freedom, and he stayed super intellectually active and curious right up until he died at 93.
93. That's amazing.
I know. He actually said something really insightful about this. He believed that for intellectuals, finding happiness was all about broadening intellectual curiosity and sympathy in all concerns of life.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So basically, never stop learning, never stop exploring.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about Arnold Gesell.
Hmm.
Many people associate him with his groundbreaking work in child development, particularly in the mid-20th century.
Oh, yeah. I remember his developmental milestones charts from, like, forever ago.
Right. They were hugely influential. And he technically retired at 68, but then he started working as a research associate at Harvard, got a grant to study vision development, which led to another book, and he continued to do research at Yale. He actually ended up publishing 54 works after his official retirement. He died at 81.
54. It's like he had two whole careers.
I know, it makes you question this whole timeline of like work and then retirement.
Yeah, it's like, what does retirement even mean when someone like him is clearly still contributing so much?
Okay, next up we have G. Stanley Hall, who's often called the father of developmental psychology here in America. He retired at 76, and according to the sources, he initially felt pretty lost. Like, desolate is the word they use.
Oh, wow. I can imagine that would be tough after such a long and successful career.
Yeah. But then, he turned that experience into something really valuable. He wrote a book called Senescence, The Last Years of Life, which was one of the first major works on the psychology of aging.
That's really turning a negative into a positive.
Right. He also wrote his autobiography, Life and Confessions of a Psychologist, before he died at 80.
It goes to show that even when you're faced with difficult transitions, you can still find new ways to be creative and make a difference.
Definitely. Okay, so now let's talk about Harry Hilson. He was an experimental psychologist who was, like, seriously dedicated to his work. He even said that work was his only hobby.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, he retired at 73, but he just kept plugging away at his research in experimental psychology with that same level of focus.
It must have been exhausting, but also really fulfilling for him.
Yeah, it seems like that was where he found his purpose.
All right, now we have Joseph Jastrow. He retired relatively early at 64, and then he did something really interesting. He basically started a whole new career in popular psychology.
Yeah, it's like he reinvented himself. He wrote books, a syndicated newspaper column, that's where the same column appears in multiple newspapers, and he gave public lectures, even hosted radio shows about psychology.
Wow, that's really taking psychology to the masses.
Totally, he was all about making those complex ideas accessible to everyday people.
That's great, and he kept doing this until his health declined, about 6 years before he died at 81.
It's amazing how adaptable he was.
Okay, next we have Walter R. Miles. He retired at 67 and then had this really distinguished second career.
Right, he taught and did research in Istanbul for 3 years.
Really? Istanbul.
Yeah, and then he became the scientific director at the U.S. submarine base in New London until he was 80.
A submarine base. That's a pretty big jump from academia.
Yeah, it goes to show that you can apply your skills and knowledge in all kinds of unexpected places.
Definitely. He wasn't really active in psychology after 80, and he lived to be 93.
That's a long and full life.
Okay, so now let's move on to a couple of folks who took a bit of a different path. First, there's Albert Poffenberger. He retired at 70 and basically moved out to the woods and got really into photography.
Oh, wow. That's a nice change of pace.
Right. He even had his work displayed in photography exhibitions, both here and internationally.
That's really cool. It shows you can find fulfillment in creative pursuits outside of your main profession.
Absolutely. He spent his last years in a nursing home and died at 92.
Okay. And then there's Sidney Pressey, who retired at 70 and kept writing a lot, mainly about teaching machines, speeding up education, and, interestingly, the experience of aging itself.
So he was writing about what he was going through.
Exactly. He actually documented his own experiences with aging, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, it is.
Later on, he expressed that he wanted help with dying, which, is a pretty sensitive topic, but a reminder of some of the complexities of getting older.
Yeah, for sure. He died in an institution at 91.
Now, another interesting case is Louis M. Terman. He retired at 65 and basically devoted the rest of his life to his longitudinal study of gifted children, the genetic studies of genius.
Oh, yeah. That was a massive long-term project. It followed those kids for decades.
Right. And Terman kept researching and writing about it until he died near 80, even though he was facing health problems.
Wow, that's commitment.
It definitely was.
Okay, so then we have William Clark Trow, who, in a way, never really stopped working. He kept writing a ton and staying active in professional organizations until his death at 88.
It shows how some people are just so connected to their work that the idea of stopping completely doesn't even make sense to them.
Yeah, I get that.
And finally, we have Robert S. Woodworth. He was often called the Dean of American Psychologists. And even after he turned 70, he was ridiculously productive, publishing 48 books, essays, and reviews. He lived to be 93.
That's incredible.
Yeah, to be that sharp and active well into your 90s, it's really a testament to the power of intellectual curiosity and the love of learning.
Absolutely. Now, it's important to remember that not every psychologist in the study followed this pattern of, working nonstop into their later years.
That's true.
The article does mention a couple of exceptions, like Harvey Carr. He retired at 65 and didn't really contribute much to psychology after that. His life between 65 and 81 when he died was mostly private. And then there's Robert M. Yerkes. He did stay involved in public and professional stuff after 67, but he did less scholarly work, and his health declined in his late 70s. In fact, his last manuscript was never even published.
Gotcha. So taking a step back and looking at all these different stories, what are the big takeaways here? What are the common threads?
Yeah, what are the big things we can learn from all this?
Well, the most obvious one is just how dedicated most of these psychologists were to their work. I mean, they kept going strong well into their later years, and their late life productivity was often directly related to the things they were passionate about their whole lives.
Right, like it was an extension of their life's work.
Exactly. And, as we saw with people like Boring and Helson, for many of them, work wasn't just about like achievements or accolades. It was about finding purpose and intrinsic satisfaction in the work itself.
Yeah, it's like the work was its own reward.
Right. And there's this really important observation in the article that I think is worth emphasizing. It says that, turning 70, or any age for that matter, doesn't automatically mean you're going to start declining in your abilities.
Especially if you've always been a high achiever.
Exactly.
I really liked that quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. "The race is over, but the work never is done while the power to work remains."
That's a good one. So basically, our exploration of these eminent psychologists shows us that for a lot of them, intellectual curiosity and a sense of purpose were the driving forces that kept them going their whole lives.
Yeah, they didn't just retire and fade away. They kept contributing to their field, or they found new, exciting things to do.
Right. It's definitely a much more nuanced picture of aging than the typical idea of just kicking back and relaxing.
Yeah, totally. So, to our listeners out there, we want to leave you with this question. What do you think about the relationship between purpose, work, and having a fulfilling life as you get older?
What kind of path do you see for yourself?
These stories show us that there are so many different ways to stay engaged and find meaning as we age.
It's really inspiring to see how they kept evolving and contributing in their own unique ways.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but keep those fascinating questions in mind.
Until next time.
See you then.